do provide psychotherapy. I am a certified sex therapist and licensed marriage and family therapist, and hold my PhD in clinical sexology, and also in an individual emotionally focused therapist, and also an emotionally focused couples therapist. So within that, really my niche and what I see is couples and men. I see both gay and heterosexual men and couples. So that's kind of my niche area and what I see in my practice. So generally, it's all couples and men, and again, either identifying as gay or heterosexual.
Very interesting. So you have more of a focus on men, it sounds like.
Yes, yeah, and kind of that came about just through my training throughout the years, and just kind of realizing that the field, predominantly is more female based, and I think I really saw a need for men to have a really safe place to express their feelings, and I think overall men tend to sometimes, depending on the situation, feel a bit, safer off the bat to meet with a male therapist than sometimes a female therapist, especially around sexual issues or sexual concerns. So,
Very interesting. I'd actually really love to talk about that more because at LiveJasmin, we have seen that a lot of the members almost start using the models, so to speak, as a surrogate therapist. They tend to start sharing a lot of their thoughts and feelings or problems that are going on in their life. And I actually interviewed one of our members last week, and he said this is his therapy. That's what he considers his therapy. Why do you think it is that men tend to feel less comfortable with traditional therapy, so to speak, and maybe navigate towards something like a cam model to share and express their
yeah.
experiences?
Um, I think that's complex, just because I think too that, in the sense that I think there's a lot of stigma around therapy, right? Not that there isn't with, camming, but I don't think that's as talked about, right? And, obviously I think people too are pretty kind of secretive, or kind of not sharing information too with people close to them when they do go to therapy too, even. But I do think that, oftentimes I think there's, um, the transaction of like, I'm paying for this, and this is, my space, and I get to explore myself and feel safe here, and I'm not going to be judged. And again, I think, you would hope that that would be the same kind of experience for people in therapy and men in therapy. But I don't think, sometimes based on, just clients who've come to see me, of, telling me some things that, prior therapists have said to them, or, have told them, this is wrong, or, what, you should, cut back on this, or this is an addiction, right? And kind of, in a sense, I feel like really shaming them. And so I think that probably, when you're, comparing it to camming, there's not going to probably be, I would guess, that level of possible judgment or shame around it. And again, I can really speak from my clients, experience, and what they've expressed to me, that there's oftentimes a lot less judgment in that space for them.
Do you have clients who have used or do use campsites?
Yes. Yeah. And I think the draw too is, again, like, there isn't necessarily going to be the fear that's going to, I think, be there around rejection by somebody who maybe they're paying, that is. And I think generally too, people who are in the, sex industry are generally, more open, in a sense, more willing to, explore with people different things that they might find sexually interesting, sexually pleasuring. And that's not necessarily the case, I think, when, we meet somebody, maybe, out or on an app, and then we're, trying to have a casual encounter or hookup with that person. That person might, again, really, judge something that, per se, my client might be into. And I think that kind of shuts them down and not wanting to kind of go that route because I'm going to get judged, I'm going to get shamed for what I'm into. And something like camming or even, having an encounter with a sex worker, right? It's like I get to have what I want and I don't have the fear of getting shamed, judged. I'm in control of the situation, right? There's so many, I think benefits that people see in, paying for a service versus going out and, having, just a casual encounter with somebody that could possibly reject them, shame them, uh, make issues around getting an erection, maintaining an erection worse because of the experience. They're, them saying, why didn't you last longer? What's wrong with you? Right. Like, again, I could keep going with that, but I think, there's just, there's a lot of benefits, I think, to it for a lot of people and a lot of people I work with. Generally the population I meet with, I think is really suffering when they can't feel like they can express themselves freely sexually, express their desires, their fantasies, right? And that's such a big thing. And especially, I feel like I have this niche of men who identify as straight and feel really concerned or worried about ever expressing any, fantasies they have with their partners, ever talking about it, or if they do, or if their partner finds out of what they're into, that they're oftentimes shamed. So, yeah.
That's a portion of the member base on LiveJasmin are members who either have tried sharing a fantasy that they have with a partner and the partner wants nothing to do with it, or maybe shame them a little bit for it, but they still have that need. Other members have expressed to me that I've interviewed that they actually are just too afraid to even share this particular fantasy or desire with a partner. So they're going directly to a cam model to experience it. Other members have told me, actually, which is interesting, once they had a positive interaction with the model, they then had the confidence to tell
Mhm.
their partner that they were into X, Y, and Z and wanted to try it with them. So
Yeah.
it's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think too that, and again, being an EFT therapist, what we see is so important is safety, right? And when we don't feel safe enough, emotionally safe enough to express, right, our desires, our fantasies, our wants, our needs sexually, then that's really going to shut us down and keep us disconnected and trying to find and meet those needs in another way versus going to our partner if we feel like they're going to judge us, they're going to shame us, they're going to tell us like what's wrong with you, right? And so, I think too, when we can increase the emotional safety within a couple, oftentimes that can help and support, I think, the emotional safety around their sexuality and being able to express their needs, their desires, their fantasies. And again, it doesn't have to mean that now you have to do all these things with me and, we have to, but right, just opening up the conversation and then figuring out, together, how do we navigate this, right? If this is something I'm just, one partner saying I'm just not into, I just don't, that's not something I feel like is for me, then at least we have the conversation and we start to open up, how do I maybe get this need fulfilled in another way?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about emotional safety, which you just mentioned. How would you define emotional safety?
Hmm. Um, I love that question, actually. I think when we feel the ability to, and again, I think it's on both sides, depending on, who we're communicating with, but I think the freedom to fully express our inner worlds, what's happening for us, and without fear that our partner is going to be rejecting us, um, denying our experience, right? That our partner is accessible and responsive and emotionally engaged. And I think that creates that ability to feel emotionally safe, right? Where it's not like I'm going to say something and share something and then I kind of feel like, oof, like I just shared this thing and now my partner is possibly going to, reject me, reject what I said, um, judge what I said, start disagreeing with what I said, of just a full kind of acceptance of that. I think that's, I'm talking more so, I think, about the experience of emotional safety, but I think that's, what I really see it when I'm working with couples is really that ability to open up and share without that fear that, okay, this is going to be judged, or, I'm not going to be able to share because you're going to automatically kind of have a rebuttal, or, judge me for what I said or disagree with what I said, instead of just sitting with it and validating it and saying, you know what, I can see how you would see it that way, right? Of being allowed to have your experience regardless, right, of the other person's experience. I think that, again, I'm describing, I think, more of the sense of what it feels like to feel emotionally safe than maybe the definition. But I think, overall, I think, um, it's kind of not second guessing or thinking about what it is we're going to say, and being able to express ourselves, express our needs, express our fears, and seek that reassurance in the relationship, or whatever that might be that we need at times.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like what you're saying is emotional safety is the other person knowing, or both parties knowing, that both can be and will be seen and heard. Our members on Jasmine, one of the main things I think they come to the site for, and what I think a lot of times they're actually paying for, is that feeling that you just described
Right.
of being seen, of being heard.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. And also just the validation part, right? Of just validating that this is a need of mine, and that it makes sense. It makes sense why I have this need, or it makes sense why I react in this way that I do. I think oftentimes people have such a hard time with making sense of their reactions, of why they react to things. But when you understand it, I think, in the lens of, emotional safety or not feeling emotionally safe, right? We all have ways of protecting ourselves. Our defenses come up, right? And that really gets us, what I tell clients is, it gets us back to our higher ground and feeling safe again when we can use our defenses. And those are our go-to, those are impulses, those are the things that have worked for us. But then oftentimes, right, I think in relationships, and that's, what I see a lot of, right, those defenses, instead of bringing that person closer that they're trying to get that connection with, it's driving them further away, right? And so it's noticing that, when I feel vulnerable, right, and I'm trying to get connection with you, I tend to criticize you or judge you or shame you, right? And that's my way of trying to really get connection with you and bring you closer to me, but all it ends up doing is pushing you further away, right? So I get the polar opposite of what I really want, right? So, I think that's where it can be so tricky. But I think that's where, if you know we learn to accept, this is this person's experience, and it makes sense when you look at, when you can see their past and why it is they've developed their ways of coping with life and life stressors, and all these different things, that it makes sense. And that, when we invalidate people, we don't make them feel safe, right? And when we can't help them make sense of even what's happening for them, and just say, okay, yeah, makes total sense, I get it, right, I understand why you would feel that way. And instead, right, it's like, well, why would you be into that, or why would you want to do that, or what's wrong with you, why would you start saying that, right? And you see people retract and shut down, and are like, oh no, I'm just not going to go there, right?
Yeah, that's what you said about, a lot of times people are trying to build connection and bring someone closer, but they're doing it in a way through attack or upset. And that actually just pushes them away. I wish that's actually applicable for many interactions in life. I feel like where someone actually may be trying to find a resolution, but their aggressive tone or nature is driving them further from that resolution, even though that is like the core intention. It's really interesting.
And most people are really unaware that that is their ability to try and cope with the distress of that person feeling far away from them, right? And that's their only way to try to restore the connection, get the connection with that person, is by turning up the emotional heat. Or, we have other people, right, that tend, we see, turn down the emotional heat and want to kind of retract and go inside. And it's like, okay, this is the only thing that's going to keep this from escalating or, becoming something bigger. So I'm just going to kind of go into my shell and go away, and that'll keep things, safe and keep things from exploding. But, on the opposite side, the more they kind of retract and go inside, the more their partner, turns up that emotional heat and starts screaming and shouting even louder, right? And so it's just driving both people further away from what they want, which is really that connection. So
I'm curious, is there any piece of research that you've seen in your career that just really stood out to you as really unusual or interesting?
oh,
I know I'm really putting you on the spot, but
yeah, I think any research really around, really what I've tried to do in my practice is kind of merge emotionally focused therapy and sex therapy together. And really, emotionally focused therapy is born out of attachment theory, and how that really affects and impacts people. So anything I think really involving research that, I really geek out about any research that really is involving kind of attachment or that if you really look at the science behind it, we are all wired for connection. We need human connection. We can't survive without it, right? And there's all these motivating factors, and I will probably go on and on if you don't shut me up, but like that we do out of trying to make sure we stay in contact with people, right? It's so interesting when I sit with clients because it's like I'm just thinking of something that happened yesterday, but it's so interesting to hear how people kind of almost self-sabotage around things, even pursuing sexual encounters. And because if somebody were to find out, right, then they might think they're weird, right? And then that would jeopardize that relationship, right? And I would be judged by that person because they would think it was weird that I did this thing with this person or didn't get an erection with this person, and then I'd face social alienation possibly, right? And so I'm probably going off on a long tangent on what you asked me, but I think too is like looking at the research around too, just emotional isolation really registers in the human brain the same as physical isolation, and how traumatizing that is for the human brain, right? And how much it affects us as humans when we can't get that connection with people that are important to us, or we would say in EFT that are safe others, or our attachment figures. And when we can't get that connection, that's why we go into panic mode. That's why we protest and have all these different strategies of trying to get that connection that generally again is very kind of self-sabotaging in a sense of getting that connection. So yeah, anything really around attachment science, and we're doing a better job, I think, of doing more research around attachment and sex, because I think that is such an area of interest that I have, and just really seeing how that plays out in relationships and affects relationships, and how when we feel more insecure, like how does that affect our sex life and sexual relationships, or when we feel more secure, right? We generally see that we can be more open with partners that we have sex with and express our needs and express our desires when we're more securely attached, which is really great to know, because then we can always work on that. And I think a lot of clients that I work with get really stuck in the idea like, oh, I took a quiz online and I was, kind of diagnosed in a sense as insecurely attached, and a lot of panic I think goes through them. And I always say the research tells us though we can always earn secure attachment, and it doesn't mean because you're anxiously attached in this relationship that you're doomed and you're always going to be. You can always earn, and that secure attachment, and that's where emotional safety really comes in too. Again, I think is really, do I feel emotionally safe with this person, and if I don't, then right, then I'm probably going to have a different type of attachment style with that person versus secure. So,
Fascinating. I actually really like that. It seems like a good portion of your interest in your career is actually around connection theories and research and
yeah. Well, and connect, yeah, right. Connection with others and connection with self, right? Because so many people have a very negative view of self. And that's something I really work with people to realize, like, at the core of it, sometimes people believe like I'm unlovable, right? Or I'm not sexually worthy, or I'm not a great sexual lover, so why would anyone want to have sex with me, right? And of course it's like a process to get down into that deep of a person to understand, but it's like deep down in there there's sometimes these really kind of core beliefs that I'm not sexy. No one would find me sexy. So why would I, want to have sex or put myself out there, because I'll only be rejected, right? And obviously that's never the case, right? And so it's understanding though that my perception, my view of self is oftentimes for some people very negative, right? I think for some people it can be very positive, right? But for some people, it can be very negative and really affect their connection with self, right? Because it's always like, why did I do this? This is so stupid. I should have never put myself out there. You knew this was going to happen. You knew you're unlovable. You knew you're not attractive. Why would you do this? Right. And so, and I think, and then again, of course, connection and relationships, is something that I'm really passionate about and really love supporting people and getting, finding their way back to their connection, because obviously through the years and through just getting stuck in those coping strategies we talked about earlier can cause a lot of distance in the relationship, and most people are unaware that that's where they get stuck, that's where they get blocked from connecting with their person. So
you mentioned earlier, that the research around one of the things that's really fascinating is just some of the research around this driving force of connection that's in us and the things that we do to connect with someone. I can only imagine, how much this goes. When you think about it, almost almost everything we do is spurred on by some form of connection, even down to getting ready in the morning to be presentable. Well, why do you want to be presentable? Because you want others to accept you or whatever the case is.
I think that's the benefit, really is helping people just feel that connection. Because again, we all need human connection. It's so important. It's so vital for us in our mental, emotional, sexual, physical health. And when we don't have it, right, we see that people struggle with depression, anxiety, right, and all kinds of mental health issues. So,
Why are we so uncomfortable with anything that has to do with intimacy, even though we are desperately wanting and needing it, even on a subconscious level?
I think it's to all the messaging we get from day one, right? When we're walking the face of this earth, right? It's like sex is dirty, or we don't talk about sex, right? Or there's so much I think negative messages about sex and sexuality and intercourse, right? And I think it makes us kind of feel shameful about it, or masturbation, self-pleasure, right? That's another thing that like so many people are like don't ever want to talk about with their partner or their spouse. And it's like, well, they're your partner and your spouse who you have sex with. And right. And it's like, well, I don't want to tell them like how often I masturbate, or right. But I think it's because we don't ever talk about it, right? We don't have these conversations and are open and saying, like it feels like, oh, this is inappropriate, this is wrong, right? We shouldn't be talking about this. And so I think it kind of suffocates any ability to self-express around sex when we feel like it's not something we should talk about. We can joke about it, or we can joke about a bad sexual experience, but we don't ever talk about great sexual experiences, or this was, generally, right? I feel like in a lot in my experience talking with clients, but I think, it's just everything and how we're socialized, especially in Western culture, right? Of sex is bad, or sex is only for procreation, oftentimes, right? A lot of clients I've worked with that, have that, kind of belief around sex. And it's like, this is not something that I should be able to experience, or, it's bad if I experience pleasure from sex. Like, I would say more so like purity culture, right, is really, kind of put a lens on sex and sexuality. So I think it's such a complex question, and it's something that we do need to talk about. I think it's vital, because I think we do need intimacy. We do need that, connection with others. It's so vital, again, for our mental health. And when we don't get it, right, we see, people in such pain and anguish and distress because they're not getting that connection. But then they're told if they get it, they're wrong for getting it, so then they kind of live in shame around the things in which they try to do to get it. And that just feels, I think, terrible for me when I hear clients tell me that. It's like, but you're going about it and you're doing it in the best way you know how, right? So let's look at that, right? Like, you're really trying to get it, and you're doing it in the best way you know how, and it's worked up until this point, right? And I get if you want to change it, or you want to do something different about how you connect with people, absolutely, like, let's talk about that. But you've been really resourceful and figured out a way to get this connection that doesn't endanger, or ostracize you from your group of people or your community, so.
Yeah, really beautifully said. As you were talking, I was seriously thinking to myself, I can see how you're probably a wonderful like couples therapist, especially when there might be tension between the two, and just kind of mediating and creating that safe and open space. Uh, yeah, I can really see how you can really provide that atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, I think it takes a lot of training. I've had a lot of training and continue to get a lot of training, right? Because there's just so many different things that can be thrown at couples therapists in general, and just making sure, like, you as the therapist are equipped with the tools. But I think when you can see it from an attachment lens, and you can understand that this person, goes into primal panic when they can't get that connection with their loved one, right? With the person that matters the most to them sometimes, right? That it makes so much sense, right? And I think that's why I really just love, emotionally focused therapy and EFT, just because it is born out of attachment science and attachment research. And it really says that, when we can't get that connection, right, that we are going to go into a primal panic, right? And that will look different for everyone. But we really need that so much. We need human connection, just like air and water and food, right? We need it. So,
Absolutely. If you were going to give one message to everyone in the world about human connection or human sexuality that you don't think the world is really getting right now, what would that message be?
mm, I don't know if you saw, my eyes got really big, but I think I would, yeah, there's so much. I'd probably want to, like, sit in front of a video and just keep talking. But um, I don't know. I think when you talk about sex and sexuality, and again, this is probably more specific to what I see, but I would love it if people got that porn is not bad, right? That porn is, it's yeah, absolutely, is it a performance? But, like, let's have realistic expectations around pornography, right? That it's not evil, it's not wrong, it's not bad, right? That, sometimes this is um individuals' only way of expressing sexuality or learning about sex or learning about sexuality. And again, I don't think it's a great resource to get your sex education from, but I do think that it can, depending on, again, and I would say depending on the site, right, that you're going to, but I think, it's managing your expectations around it and then realizing that, like, you know, not right, not every man has a 9-inch penis, right? And so, not to kind of internalize that and then think, oh, something must be wrong with me because I have a 5-inch penis, right? So realizing and having realistic expectations around porn, but also that to not necessarily demonize it or make it bad, because we know 90% of the world's population that has access to internet watches pornography, right? And yet we don't talk about it, right? It's so shameful to ever talk about porn or the type of porn you watch or the type of porn you want to watch, right? Or whatever. So I think that just because, again, I see it so much in my practice, and it's like I want to kind of hit my head against the wall sometimes because I think it's just so demonized and like bad, and it's the cause of everything, but we're really not getting to the cause of what's going on. It usually there's something deeper there around kind of someone's pornography use or why their partner thinks it's bad or wrong or they shouldn't be using it. And then I guess too, just reiterating a lot of what I've said here, but that, like, we need human connection, right? It's so important for us. And, we're not codependent because we need human connection, because we want to be close to people. We want to be close to, another person, right? Because I think that, yeah, really probably irks me or gets under my skin when people say, oh, well, I just need to learn how to love myself, and I need to learn how to just be on myself, be by myself, and I'll be, then I'll find the right person, and then I'll be in the right relationship, right? And I think two people can learn so much about themselves in relationships. So I would really say, just like, it's okay, like it's perfectly normal to need someone, and to reach out for that connection and get that connection any way that you know how. Like, that is so normal. That's such a normal human need that we have. So you're not bad, you're not wrong for needing it or wanting it, and nothing is wrong with you, and you're not codependent. So
I love that. I love that you just gave people permission to reach out and get the connection they need in any way that they are feeling they need it or can get it.
mhm.
Because there is this idea that, and while I do believe also in, giving yourself your needs, we also, like you said, do need other people. We are wired that way. There is a lot of scientific research to show that this is something in our DNA. Like, we can't change that. This is lots of evolution, but um yeah, I love that people have permission to reach out in whatever way they can, whether it be, just making a call to someone and saying, hey, I just need to hear your voice, or messaging someone on Instagram, or using a cam site, or whatever the case is. Yeah, I love that you gave people permission. I think that sometimes that's what people need, is
Right.
permission to know it's okay to do this. In fact, if you want to use the word normal, it's normal if you're a human being to need and want these things. So beautifully said. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.